if a hard recession sets in and people do somehow not spend money on this service anymore, it could get bad. We're just going to have to figure out how we're going to get through it together. And I promise you, when we get through it 5 years from now, we'll be bragging about it. We will say, hey, we got that business through COVID.
Yeah.
And that's going to feel good.
And so what's interesting to me is you mentioned earlier that people want to build a relationship with people who does their lawn mowing and does their landscaping. And so what happened to their current providers before GreenPal came in? Because they had probably, a good relationship with their landscape people back then. They built that relationship over time, and then GreenPal came in and sent them a couple of quotes. What happened? What do you think happened there?
Yeah, it's in the lawn mowing landscape maintenance industry. There's this phenomenon of the case of the disappearing lawn guy.
Okay.
For whatever reason, these guys and gals come and go. They're not very well capitalized.
Uh-huh.
It's a tough business.
Mm-hmm.
It's an asset intense business. You have to have to make a living in this business. You got to have $15,000 or $20,000 of equipment.
Wow.
That stuff breaks, and these services come and go.
Right.
And what we learned, and even though I've spent my entire life in this industry, what I failed to understand was a lot of what our platform is doing is ensuring that service shows up every single Thursday or every single Tuesday for the life of that relationship. And so for the service provider, our platform is kind of like a boss in a pocket. It reminds that service provider if they're late. It scores them if they're late. It sends them 5 text messages throughout the course of the day if they haven't gotten to that client already. They're reviewed for every service that they provide. Whereas none of these things exist in the analog world. It's kind of like the Wild West. It's hey, if he shows up, okay, and maybe he might mail you a bill, maybe he won't. Maybe you'll leave a check under the mat. It's just a mess. It's a total mess. So our platform, it makes the introduction, the matchmaking happen in a snap. Yeah. But then for the remaining 38 visits that you need to have that year, it makes it happen on autopilot. And if if they don't show up, you can hire another person like that.
Yeah, and it will be just as good because you have the ratings there.
Just as seamless.
Yeah, awesome. 25 people in your team right now in GreenPal. This is your second business. You were leading 150 people. What's the difference between that 150 and this 25 people here right now that you have? How do you lead them?
It's very different.
Are you older now? You're older than most of them.
I'm old. I'm no longer the young kid trying to bark orders at people. So that's a little easier. So it's the difference between knowledge workers and blue collar laborers. Mm-hmm. Now, in my previous company of 150, I had middle managers, I had sales managers, I had designers, I had architects that worked for me, and they weren't laborers in the traditional sense, but most of the 150 were laborers. And so leading a workforce of laborers who are doing physically intense work all day long is different than leading a workforce of knowledge workers that understand how to write Ruby on Rails. Yeah. So there's similarities, but there's also differences. So that's the main different thing. In my last business, I took pride in the fact that I will never ask somebody to do something that I haven't personally done, because I built that business from scratch, from the ground up. Any services that we executed, any sales work, any phone answering, any accounting work, any of that stuff, I had personally done it before I had hired somebody, delegated. Yeah. In this company, I'm a decent front end programmer,
Mm-hmm.
but man, I don't know the first thing about sysadmin or the first
Yeah.
thing about how to write back end code. And so I
Yeah.
have to like delegate not from a position of authority or delegation. It's more like almost like abdication. It's like it's faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's harder. It's harder because you kind of have to trust the feedback you're getting and
Yeah.
verify it. So
Yeah.
those are some of the key differences between a blue collar business and a tech company.
Yeah. So your role now is more inspiring them, more, helping them to have better knowledge, character, leadership. Do you have leadership programs you're running in your company right now?
Yeah. So we try to identify who wants to be a leader, because a lot of your engineers don't want to be. That's why they're good at what they do. They don't want to lead other people. So that's a little tough. Of our 25, we try to keep it down to 5 direct reports per manager. And and it's small enough to where I'm still able to kind of keep my hands in all of it. If we double in size, I'll have to hire another manager to work under me. But as it is right now, I'm able to stay with my team leads and also have a personal relationship with every single person on the team, which is nice.
Right.
It's a nice size. I like it.
Yeah, 25. That's sweet.
Man, it's a good size, and we're growing. We're probably going to outgrow it, but I'm just going to have to deal with it. But a lot of what I do is getting in there and removing log jams and helping our teams help each other and making that all flow smooth. Kind of like what our president is not doing in the current crisis that we have in the United States. The exact opposite of what he's not doing.
Oh my god!
Is what I do.
That's awesome.
I didn't want to get political, but
yeah, I hear you. So, talking about the president and the current crisis that we have, where a lot of businesses have just been stumped by this pandemic. And a lot of economies have slowed down to a grinding halt. Same here in the Philippines. But how are you doing? How's your business doing there? You had 8 million in annual revenue last year. What's your projection for this year in spite of this pandemic?
Yeah, so we're on a $15 million run rate. We've been doubling every year for the past 5 years. And when this set in, I was just like, oh, here we go. Because I've been through this. I was young during the dot-com bubble, but I had a business and I remember it. And I survived the 2008 Great Recession. And so I've been through this. And so I was just braced for half of our sales to evaporate. Luckily for us, it's held stable. We're still growing. And I can't tell you that it's because we're just doing so great, or if it's because like contactless ordering for this thing. The grass doesn't stop growing.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe people, like you can't let the grass like grow above your head.
Yeah.
And people don't want to have to deal with a landscaper in their front yard. So the idea of like DoorDash or Grab or something like that is like that makes sense to them for their grass cutting. So that could be helping us. But so for us, we're very fortunate that we're growing through this. In fact, a company here in Nashville went out of business, big tech company, and we were able to pick up a couple of their engineers.
Wow.
So it's actually in a weird way kind of helped us. But what I'm telling my team is that, hey, it could get bad. If a hard recession sets in and people do somehow not spend money on this service anymore, it could get bad. We're just going to have to figure out how we're going to get through it together. And I promise you, when we get through it 5 years from now, we'll be bragging about it. We will say, hey, we got that business through COVID.
Yeah.
And that's going to feel good. Yeah. Let that motivate you that you can look back on this 3, 5, 10 years from now and feel like you accomplished something because you didn't go under. And a lot of your competitors did.
Yep, and not a lot of people can say that. When asked what were you doing during the pandemic, not a lot of people could say, "Well, I was growing business and we were thriving during that time."
Right. Very few people are going to say that. And sadly, most people are going to say, "Yeah, wipe me out."
Yeah.
And
Sadly.
you don't want to be one of those. Don't roll over because, man, how's the quote go? We'll find a way or we'll make one. There's a way.
Yeah.
There's a way forward. It's just going to take work.
Yep. And so we're down to our last question, and that may be for those people who are there in that rut right now. What is something you want to tell them to help them get through this pandemic where they are just stumped, they are almost wiped out, they're feeling the gravity of the economy just not moving?
Hopefully, you've got a good culture in place. If you do, and you feel like you do, and you feel like you can trust your teammates and they trust you, then you can knuckle down on that, because that'll give you some discretionary effort, some discretionary buy-in from your team members. If you can honestly say, hey, this situation sucks, but at least our culture's good, then lean back on that. Bring everybody together as a family and say, we're going to get through this together as a family. It's going to take some sacrifices from all of us. And then you as the leader, you need to try to figure out a way not to take a paycheck.
Yeah.
Live on beans and rice, do whatever it is you got to do.
Yep.
Sell your car, whatever you got to do to lead through this crisis.
Yeah.
Personally, you need to show your team that you're willing to do that.
Yeah.
And then figure out some way to make the math work, whether it be everybody work for half as much or 80 cents on the dollar, whatever it is. Figure out that math and try to figure out who's going to stay on the board and who's not. Some people will not. Some people will. As you come through it and you come on the other side of this, you're going to be a lot stronger team. You're going to actually have a better team in place after you make those sacrifices and figure out who's going to stick with you or not. Now, the situation may be so dire that there's just no way forward. There's no path forward. If that's the case, be real with your team. Do not sugarcoat it. Don't be a salesman. They will respect the candor, and they'll be able to tell real quick if you're being real or not. So tell them, we got a week left of payroll. We got a week left of cash for payroll, and then I'm going to have to furlough or lay half of you off. I mean, it is what it is, and people are expecting it. So It's not the end of the world. Find the way forward. Keep the business alive by all means.
Yep. Just to share a little bit, in SEO Hacker, we actually communicated that it's better for all of us to suffer a little than for some of us to suffer a lot. And so we committed not to lop anyone off. We committed not to lay anyone off. And so they're all confident that we are going to make it through this. And I told them, if your dog at home or your cat at home is looking tastier by the minute, call me. I'm going to help you out. Don't eat your dog. Don't eat your cat.
I love it.
All right.
I love it. But I'll say this. I went through this in 2008 with 100 some odd people, and we figured out a way to not lay anybody off.
Wow.
And it almost sunk the company, but we got through it, and we were stronger when we came out of it. And that just only made our culture even better. And I still have that as a personal source of pride.
Yeah.
It was a private victory for me.
It is a huge victory.
Right.
Huge victory.
So bring your company through that. You'll be glad you did. You'll be glad you made the hard decisions. You'll be glad you gutted your way through it, and you'll look back on this 3 or 4 or 5 years from now, and you'll be like, wow, we survived that.
Awesome. Well, Bryan, it's been an amazing time for me, and I'm sure for our listeners. We learned a ton from you that we can use immediately in our business, especially through this time of crisis. Last 2 questions, and this is all about you. What's next for you? What's the next project you're working on, or what's something new that you're working on, and where can people find you?
Man, my baby right now is GreenPal. I got to be honest with you. I want to take this thing to the moon. We're in every major state in the United States right now, but we're not in every nook and cranny of every town. And I really want to make it a household name in North America. Canada is going to be coming up late this year. So that's my baby. That's why I get out of bed. I love it. I can only focus on one thing at a time. So that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going to be doing for the next 10 years.
Awesome.
If anybody wants to get at me, just email me, Bryan, Bryan, @yourgreenpal.com, yourgreenpal.com.
Got it. Bryan at yourgreenpal.com. Are you on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram? Where can people find you on social media?
Twitter, Bryan M. Clayton.
Bryan M. Clayton. I'm going to put that in the show notes. So, folks, if you want to email Bryan, if you want to follow him on Twitter, I'm going to put that in this show's show notes. You can check it out at leadershipstack.com/podcast. This show is going to be there alongside the video that we're going to be uploading on YouTube with me and Bryan, so you can see how we did the recording. Well, Bryan, it's been a pleasure. I know it's late there. It's probably past midnight. Thank you so much for your time. We are better for it.
My pleasure. I enjoyed it.